In the following tutorial, we will be covering all the units in Module 4 of the book, Philosophy and Logic. This GST is from National Open University of Nigeria. My name is Dan Asukwo, your instructor. Are you writing any of the GSTs soon, or you want to improve your knowledge on philosophy and logic? If so, let us know on the comment section so that we can help you out. If you will need a summary of the book, let us know at the comment section. If you are a NOUN student or from any other universities, this will be very useful for you. Please do well to share it with others as well as on your study groups. Why not do well to subscribe, like, comment, and share for others too to benefit. Module 4, Fallacies and Definitions. Unit 1, Fallacies, Part 1, 1.0, Introduction. This study unit introduces you to the definition and classification of fallacies. Our emphasis here will be particularly on fallacies involving irrelevant premises. 2.0, Intended Learning Outcomes. By the end of this unit, you will be able to classify fallacies, evaluate fallacies. It is hoped that at the end of this unit, you should be able to define and classify fallacies, know major formal fallacies such as affirming the consequent, denying the antecedent, fallacy of four terms, existential fallacy, and fallacy of exclusive premises. 3.0. Main content. 3.1. Definition and classification of fallacies. Some arguments sometimes look so good and convincing, however, when we critically examine them, we realize that they are weak, deceptive, strong, or full of errors. What logician therefore always do is to explain the causes of errors in arguments and to avoid them in reasoning. The best way to do this is to first recognize these errors of reasoning and avoid them completely. This is because deceptive arguments are capable of misleading. You need to know that these kinds of reasoning sometimes look convincing and logically correct. Without adequate carefulness, one can accept them as true, valid, and correct reasoning. These forms of reasoning are regarded as being fallacious. One fact that you must note here is that fallacious argument or reasoning is not necessarily an invalid argument. Rather, it is an argument that appears sufficiently acceptable, but which contains errors. OKE and Audu, 2006, 107. Usually a fallacy is committed in the process of moving from the premises of an argument to its conclusion. Because of these errors or mistakes, the premises do not justify the conclusion, or there is no proper link between the premises and the conclusion. In short, a fallacy is an error in reasoning that tends to be psychologically persuasive. It is an invalid argument that has the deceptive appearance of being valid. According to Uduma o Uduma, 2015, the classification of fallacies can be dated back to Aristotle, who gave two principal divisions, namely, A. Fallacies due to the misuse of language, and B. Those which arose from defects of thought rather than of language. But the common classification are formal fallacies and informal fallacies. 3. 1.1. Formal fallacies. This kind of fallacies are concerned with the structure or form of an argument rather than the content. Formal fallacies are also called pure fallacy. What you must note about arguments in this fallacy is that they always violate a rule of the logical system of which the argument is a part. In this regard, invalid deductive argument is formally fallacious. Thus, formal fallacies are errors that evolve from neglect or deviation from formal rule of logic, which simply holds that premises must adequately support the conclusion, and that if the premises of an argument is true, the conclusion must also be true. 3 examples of these fallacies are: 1. The formal fallacy associated with the deviation from the modus ponens rule. This is called the fallacy of affirming the consequent. 2. The formal fallacy that is associated with the deviation from the modus tollens rule, which is also known as the fallacy of denying the antecedent. 3. The formal fallacy of four-term. 4. Existential fallacy. 5. Formal fallacy of exclusive premises. 3. 1.2. Fallacy of affirming the consequent. This is committed when the formal rule of affirming the antecedent or modus ponens is violated. You should know that the antecedent of any argument is the first part of the argument, while the consequent is the latter part. They are like cause and effect. The rule of modus ponens states that in an argument, if a material conditional statement, the first premise, and its antecedent, the second premise, are true, then its consequent must be true. Achylique, 1999, 16. Thus in the fallacy, the second premise of the argument affirms the consequent instead of the antecedent, while the conclusion affirms the antecedent rather than the consequent. For example, if Tinubu is a leader, then Tinubu is a politician. Tinubu is a politician, therefore Tinubu is a leader. Schematically we have, if P, then QQ, therefore P. Here the argument runs contrary to the rules of modus ponens. Commonsensical, the second premise and the conclusion are faulty when compared to a properly constituted modus ponens rule. It is possible that Tinubu is not a leader, and yet he may be a politician. This is shown below. If Tinubu is a leader, then Tinubu is a politician. Tinubu is a leader. Therefore, Tinubu is a politician. Schematically we have, if P then QP, therefore Q. In this argument, unlike the first, the second premise is an affirmation of the antecedent. 3. 1.3. Fallacy of denying the antecedent. This fallacy occurs when the rule of modus tollens is violated. The rule of modus tollens holds that in an argument, if the material conditional statement, first premise, is true and its consequent is false, then its antecedent, conclusion, must be false. The fallacy of denying the antecedent takes the form of an argument in which one premise is a conditional, and the other is the negation of its antecedent, from which the negation of the consequent is deduced as the conclusion of the argument. For example, if Tinubu is a leader, then Tinubu is a politician. Tinubu is not a politician. Therefore, Tinubu is not a leader. Schematically we have, if P then Q not P, therefore not Q. From this example, the second premise and conclusion are faulty. 3. 1.4. Fallacy of four term. An argument in a categorical logic commits the fallacy of four terms if either there are more than three terms in the argument, or a term is assigned different meanings at different points in the argument. 3. 1.5. Existential fallacy. In categorical logic, a syllogistic argument commits the existential fallacy if its conclusion is a particular proposition, and both of its premises are universal propositions. It is fallacious to derive a conclusion of a proposition from the argument whose premises are universal propositions. For example, all Nigerians are human beings. All human beings are mortal. Therefore, Delagiwa, a Nigerian, was mortal. 3. 1.6. Fallacy of exclusive premises. This fallacy occurs in any form of reasoning when the rule that every valid categorical syllogism must have at least one affirmative premise, A or I, is violated. The major characteristic of the fallacy of exclusive premises is that both premises are negative propositions, E or O. For example, no goats are human beings. Some human beings are not rational. Therefore, some goats are not rational. 3. 2.0. Informal fallacies. This fallacy is also known as material fallacy. It is informed of any argument that is psychologically persuasive but not logically persuasive. In informal fallacies, there are no mistakes in the formal structure of arguments, rather they are rooted in the failure of the evidence to be relevant to the conclusion, or in some injustice and ambiguity. Adegboyega, 2010, 71. Informal fallacies rests on the content of the argument. Unlike formal fallacy, no any coded rules is violated. Individuals may fall into this error because of his or her carelessness, coupled with inattention or being misled by language problems. There are different types of informal fallacies, and these are 1. Fallacies of ambiguity. 2. Fallacies of weak induction. 3. Fallacies of relevance, and 4. Fallacies of presumption. For this section, we shall focus on fallacies of ambiguity and fallacies of relevance. The remaining two fallacies of wheel induction and fallacies of presumption shall be in the subsequent unit. 3. 2.1. Fallacies of ambiguity. These are linguistic fallacies. These fallacies occur when ambiguous words, phrase, or statements occur in arguments without carefully attending to the ambiguity. You must know that ambiguous words are words that has more than one meaning in a statement, or when it can be used in more than one way. For instance, the word file can be used to refer to metal tool with roughened surface or cover case for keeping papers together for reference purpose, and it can refer to line of persons or one behind the other. We shall focus here only on the 404. Major fallacies of ambiguity. 1. Fallacy of equivocation. There are some words that contain more than one meaning. The fallacy of equivocation occurs when such a word is used in a manner that implies different meanings or senses of the word within the same context. For instance, only man is rational, but no woman is a man. Therefore, no woman is rational. This is a fallacy of equivocation because the word man is used with two different senses within the same context. In the first sentence, the word man means humans, while in the second it means male humans. 2. Fallacy of amphiboly. The fallacies of amphiboly and ambiguity are very similar. The only difference is that in the fallacy of amphiboly, the double meaning is due to syntactic or sentence structure, such as a grammatical error or a mistake in punctuation. The fallacy of amphiboly is more subtle and harder to detect than that of equivocation. It mostly occurs when we misinterpret someone's original statement or intention. Here are typical cases. Tundi removed the egg from the cup, so Samuel broke it. Although we know the meaning of the word it, but what this word refers to is not clear to us. What did Samuel break? Is it the glass cup or the egg? 3. Fallacy of composition. There are two major ways of committing the fallacy of composition. These are 1. When a part is identified with the whole, that is, the parts have the attribute X, therefore the whole has attribute X. For instance, I. Each of the parts of this car engine is very light, therefore the car engine is very light. 2. Each player on the football team is outstanding, hence the team itself is outstanding. The fallacy of composition is committed here because even though the car engine is made up of very light parts, but when put together the car engines it becomes very heavy. It is the same with the football team. Even though each of the players is outstanding and there is a lack of teamwork or insufficient opportunity to practice together, the team may not be outstanding. 2. The second kind of the fallacy of composition is committed when there is confusion between the distributive and collective use of general terms. For example, elephants eat more than humans. So, elephant taken as a group eat more than humans taken as a group. There is a fallacy of composition here because in the premises, elephant eat more than humans, the attribute of eating more than is predicated distributive. That is, each individual elephant is said to eat more than any individual human eats. However, in the conclusion, the attribute eating more than is predicated collectively. That is, elephant taken as a group are said to eat more than humans taken as a group, which is not true, because there are so many more humans than elephant. 4. Fallacy of division. The fallacy of division is nothing more than the opposite of composition. In the fallacy of division, if the whole has the attribute X, therefore the parts must have the attribute X as well. Example, the airplane is heavy, so each of its part is heavy. There is a fallacy of division here because some of the parts of a heavy airplane may be very light. Here is an example of the second type of division fallacy. The soccer team is excellent. Hence, each member of the team is excellent. There is a fallacy of division here because a team may be excellent due to teamwork and few outstanding players, and yet have members who are not themselves excellent players. 3. 2.2. Fallacies of relevance. These fallacies present the premises of arguments in such a way that their conclusion could be doubted. That is, given the premises of an argument, we do not have a strong conviction or confidence for accepting the conclusion of such argument. Some of these fallacies are discussed below. A. Fallacy of attacking the person. Argumentum ad hominem. The main business of this fallacy is to attack the person who advances an argument rather than providing a rational critique of the argument itself. The attacker's main objective is to make its assertion acceptable. This fallacy is informed of character assassination. For instance, Mr. A. President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua of the Federal Territory of Nigeria will be the next African Union chairman. Mr. B. Mr. Umaru Musa Yar'Adua is the president of one of the most corrupted countries in the world. Therefore, it is impossible for him to become the future African Union chairman. An argument against the person does not always involve outright verbal abuse. Subtle ways are sometimes used, but with the sole aim of discrediting an opponent by suggesting that the opponent's judgment is distorted by some factor in his or her circumstances. This form of argument is sometimes called the circumstantial ad hominem. For instance, during the celebration of their marriage, Mr. and Mrs. Kula refused to serve beer to their guests. They claimed that no born-again child of God would either drink or serve beer to other persons. Here you can see that Mr. and Mrs. Kunla commit the circumstantial form of the argument and homonym fallacy. You should always remember that the attack in the argument against the person can take three forms. 1. Abusive, direct personal attack on the opponent. 2. Circumstantial, attempt to discredit by calling attention to the circumstances or situation of the opponent. 3. Tu quoque. This is committed when, in an argument rather than defending oneself, the arguer is being found guilty. 4. The fallacy of attacking affiliation. This is occurring when, in an argument, it is concluded that a people should either be accepted or rejected because he belongs to a group or association which one does not like or that is unpopular with one's audience. B. Appeal to force, argumentum ad baculum. The word baculum is a Latin word which stands for staff. Here, the word staff is seen as a symbol of power. Argumentum ad baculum fallacy is mostly used whenever a conclusion is defended by a threat to the well, being of those who do not accept it. The threat can be physical, moral, or psychological. It can be implicit or explicit. Here is the case of a physical threat. Godwin, I don't want to see you driving any car to campus whenever you have my class. Do you realize I am your teacher and I am the alpha in this course? I am the one who will determine whether you pass or fail at the end of the semester. It is better you comply or else you will fail this course. You can see here that there is no logical link, the threatened, you will fail on the conclusion. Of course you will agree that there is nothing bad in Godwin a car to campus, but it is probable that the threat might induce Godwin to accept the conclusion. Another example is the case of a psychological threat. Listen, Valerie, I know you disagree with my view about the building project. You have made your disagreement clear to everyone. Well, it's time for you to see that you are mistaken. Let me get right to the point. I know you have been lying to your husband about where you go on Wednesday afternoons. Unless you want him to know where you really go, it's time for you to realize that I have been right about the building project all along. You follow me? Layman 2002, p. 127. You can see here that even though the threat to expose the lie has no relationship with the building project, it may still work because fear is a strong motivator, and it can influence someone's thinking. C. Appeal to popular feeling / mob appeal. Argumentum ad populum. Remember that populum is a Latin word which stands for people or notion. So argumentum ad populum occurs when you try to persuade someone or a group by appealing to their emotion, feeling, and sentiments. This is mostly used in political campaigns, public debates, and advertising. Here is a typical case of political campaign. I look out at you all and I tell you, I am proud to be here. Proud to belong to a party that stands for what is good for America. Proud to cast my lot with the kind of people who make this nation great. Proud to stand with men and women who can get our nation back on its feet. Yes, there are those who criticize us, who label our view of trade agreements as protectionist. But when I look at you hard-working people, I know we are right, and the critics are wrong. Layman 2002, 128. You can see that the sole purpose of this speech is to persuade the crowd no matter what. It is fallacious because the premise is to the effect that I am proud to be associated with you, and you are hard-working people, are irrelevant to the conclusion. Our view of trade agreements is right. Also bear in mind that you do not necessarily need to address a large group before you commit this kind of fallacy. Whatever you try to convince by appealing to the need of or acceptance of your view by other people makes you to commit the fallacy. Here is an example. Miss Riley, are you saying that President Bush made a moral error when he decided to go to war with Iraq? I cannot believe my ears. That is not how Americans feel, not true Americans anyway. You are an American, aren't you, Miss Riley? Layman 2002, 128. This is a fallacy because there is no logical connection between the fact that Miss Riley is an American. Therefore, Iraq war must be justified. D. Appeal to pity, argumentum ad misericordiam. Misericordiam is a Latin word that stands for pity or mercy. So argumentum ad misericordiam is a fallacy that attempts to support a conclusion simply by evoking pity in one's audience, even though the statements that evoke the pity are logically unrelated to the conclusion. For example, I want to build more schools, more hospitals, and create more employment opportunity. If you don't vote for me this second term, I cannot achieve these, therefore, vote for me the second term. Adegboyega, 2010, 79. The appeal to pity is mostly used by politicians during campaign for election and by lawyers. The lawyer's main objective is to get the court to accept the conclusion that a client is innocent or at least to obtain a reduction in the measure of punishment. E. Fallacy of irrelevant conclusion, ignoratio elenchi. This fallacy is also called fallacy of ignoring the issue. This is because the conclusion that is drawn in the argument is irrelevant to the premises, that is non sequitur. For example, the members of the National Assembly have been accused of official misconducts. Therefore, the Assembly complex should be closed down. F. Red herring fallacy. It is committed when the person responding to an argument fails to address whichever issues the arguer has raised. In a way, the respondent distracts the arguer's attention because the respondent is evasive. Example, Ocon. The use of condom during sex should be encouraged. This is because it prevents unwanted pregnancy among youths. Eckert. Mr. Ocon, are you a Christian or a Muslim? Ocon. I am neither a Christian nor a Muslim. I'm a traditionalist. Here, Eckert did not address the issue that was raised and Ocon had raised in his argument, rather he only distracts his attention. J. Fallacy of accident. This fallacy is committed when a claim is based on a rule that is generally valid, but the arguer fails to see the case at hand as an exception. It is common among legalists, moralists, educationists, and other social theorists who always infer answer to specific human issues from some absolute moral, legal, educational, and other social rules. Ibid. For example, these set of people can reason that given that lying is bad, and then one should not tell lies, even to save life of an innocent being. Or given that the idea of murder is bad, it is unhuman to commit abortion, even if it is to save life of the mother, or even when the fetus is to be epileptically defective. 4.0. Conclusion. Fallacies, ambiguity, and relevance are things worthy of note in our daily activities. Unit 2 Fallacies, Part 2, 1.0. Introduction. As already stated, although studies units are autonomous, they are interconnected as well. This study unit is the continuation of the preceding one. But here we will particularly be discussing the fallacies involving weak induction and fallacies of presumption. 2.0. Intended learning outcomes. By the end of this unit, you will be able to evaluate fallacies of presumption and weak induction. 3.0. Main content. 3.1. Fallacies of presumption. This fallacy is committed when there is the assumption in the argument's premises of what the arguer is out to prove. We shall discuss 3 of these types of fallacies, and these includes the fallacy of complex or loaded question, fallacy of leading question and begging the question, petito principii. 3. 1.1. Fallacy of complex or loaded question. This fallacy of complex question is committed when 2 or more questions are asked together at once, and as an answer to one question allows one to draw a conclusion regarding the other question. Example of such fallacy. Have you stopped beating your wife? Here the questioner thus assumes the person addressed has a wife and beats his wife. Hence it is a complex question to answer. 3. 1.2. Fallacy of leading question. This occurs when an arguer attempts to base his claim on a prepared answer, such as a witness under cross-examination. For example, you don't know any of the accused person, do you? No, I don't. This fallacy is commonly used by lawyers and any other investigative officers to extract information from suspects and criminals. 3. 1.3. Fallacy of begging the question. Petito principii. Petito principii is a Latin word which means begging the principle. The fallacy of begging the question is any form of argument whose conclusion is nothing more than a restatement of one of the premises. This form of fallacy is otherwise called circular reasoning. Example: God exists because the Bible tells us so, We know that whatever the Bible tells us must be true, because it is the revealed words of God. 3.2. Fallacies of weak induction. These fallacies are committed when in an argument the premises offer some but not enough evidence for the conclusion. Some of these fallacies are discussed below. 2.1. Fallacy of appeal to authority. Argumentum ad vericuitam. This is a fallacy based on accepting uncritically the judgment of an expert merely because he is an authority without mindful of the evidence contained in the premises of the argument which ought to indicate the conclusion. For example, Reverend Father Kuka has claimed that marriage must be between a man and a woman. Therefore, gay marriage should not be legalized. 2.2. Fallacy of appeal to ignorance. Argumentum ad ignorantiam. The appeal to ignorance means that the conclusion of an argument is proven simply because nobody has proved the opposite. Here is a typical example. After centuries trying, no one has been able to prove that reincarnation occurs. So at this point, I think we can safely conclude that reincarnation does not occur. You can see that this fallacy has its own limits. That it has not been proven may be erroneous. This logic cannot hold in scientific matters mostly based on hypothesis and wait-and-see attitude. 2.3. Fallacy of false cause. There are many forms of false cause fallacy. Uduma, 2015. But the most common form is called in Latin post hoc, ergo propter hoc, which means after this, therefore because of this. Generally, a false cause fallacy occurs when the arguer illegitimately assumes a possible cause of a phenomenon to be the only cause, although reasons are lacking for excluding other possible causes. Here is an example. Since I came into office 2 years ago, the rate of violent crime has decreased significantly. So the longer prison sentences we recommended are working. Layman, 2151. There is false cause because the longer prison sentences may be a causal factor. But the simple fact that the longer sentences preceded the decrease in violent crime does not prove this. There is no doubt that other causal factors need to be considered. 2.4. Slippery slope. A slippery slope argument, of course fallacious, has a unique structure as follows. There is a slope, a chain of causes. It is slippery. Therefore, if you take even one step on the slope, you will slide and fall all the way to the bottom. Since the bottom is a bad place to be, you should not take the first step. Slippery slope fallacy occurs when in argument it is concluded that an event should be prevented from happening due to the belief that its occurrence will bring the occurrence of certain other events we do not want or wish to have them happen. Example: if there is labor strike, schools will not run, pupils will stay at home, market will be closed, the economy will be affected. So strike should not be allowed, or labor strike should be prevented or avoided. Fada Hunsi and Adegboyega, 2010-88. The major problem with arguing this way is that unwanted events may not follow from the event that the claim advocates should be prevented. 2.5. Fallacy of hasty generalization. This fallacy is an argument which applies not only to the premise cases, but also to cases that are different in kind from those referred to in the premises. For example, someone who has observed the performance of most logic students at interviews, and then concludes that the understanding of logic enhances human skill at answering questions. Thus, its study must be enforced in schools. 2.6. Gambler's fallacy. This fallacy is committed when one argues that given the sequential or the frequent occurrences of an event in series, the probability of the event reoccurrence will increase. For instance, Socrates played Ludo game 10 times and he lost, therefore the probability that he will lose the 11th game has decreased. You need to know that the winning or losing of the game at the 11th time should be seen on 50 basis. The game can end in either ways for Socrates irrespective of the previous sequential frequent occurrences. 2.7. False dilemma. In logic, the fallacy of false dilemma simply means that you use a premise that unjustifiably reduces the number of alternatives to be considered. In other words, there is a fallacy of false dilemma when the arguer assumes without justification a limited number of possible alternatives when there is more than that. Here is a typical case. I'm tired of all these young people criticizing their own country. What I say is this: Nigeria, love it or leave it. And since these people obviously do not want to leave the country, they should love it instead of criticizing it. There is a fallacy of false dilemma here because the argument presupposes that there are only two options. Either you love Nigeria uncritically, or you emigrate. However, you should know that there are other possibilities or alternatives. You should also know that an argument cannot be called false dilemma unless you are able to specify at least one alternative that has been ignored. You should also remember that it is not every false cause fallacy that involves the unwarranted assumption that if X precedes Y, then X causes Y. 4.0. Conclusion. This study unit dealt with fallacies of ambiguity and unwarranted assumptions. Unit 3, Definitions, Part 1. 1.0. Introduction. A definition is a sine qua non tool for effective communication. We cannot avoid vagueness, ambiguity, or equivocation unless we rightly define our words or terms. It is the major means through which we understand the meaning of words. It is different from explanation, verbal definition, translation, or mere interpretation. It is true that definition contains all of them, but they are not identical. Definition is different from them in the sense that it is sharp, short, delimited, and consisting of the word to be defined. That is, the definiendum, which may be a single word, and the expression which defines the expression, that is, the definitions, which must contain more than one word. Stebbing, 1993. Although there are many types of definitions, this section introduces you to the major types of definition that are most helpful in clarifying and sharpening arguments. 2.0. Intended learning outcome. By the end of this unit, you will be able to apply basic philosophical definitions, lexical, theoretical, intentional, extensional, denotative, and connotative in solving philosophical challenges. 3.0. Main content. You need to know from the outset here what definition is. Definition of a thing has been described as statement of essence of a thing. This description was given by the classical thought, and it has its origin in Aristotle's assertion that an object's essential attribute forms its essential nature. Thus, in defining such object, its essential attributes must be included. You need to know here that the classical idea of definition has led to philosophers' distinction between nominal and real essence. That is, while the name home, nominal, is meaningful and we may know it, however, we may not know the essential nature, real essence of home. Thus, the meaning of a name is distinct from the nature a thing may have in order that the name apply to it. As distinction can be drawn between nominal and real essence, philosophers over the years have also made distinctions between nominal and real definition. A nominal definition, one that explains what a word means. That is, it says what the nominal essence is. See the above example. Real definition, on the other hand, expresses the real nature of a thing. Let us ask ourselves a question here. Why do we engage ourselves with drawing this distinction here, especially the about the notion of essence in definition? The reason for this is that there are certain intrinsic elements about that which is to be defined definiendum, which that which is doing the defining, definients, must capture, without which the definients will not have same meaning with the definiendum, which may lead to ambiguity and vagueness. Uduma, 2015. As stated earlier, although there are many types of definition, this section is to introduce you to the major types of definition that are most helpful in clarifying and sharpening arguments. 3.1. Major types of definitions. In most introductory logic textbooks, we can identify at least 7 major types of definitions. This section will focus only on the lexical, theoretical, intentional, and extensional definitions and denotative and connotative. 3.2. Lexical definition. A lexical definition is identical with a dictionary definition. It is the conventional or established meaning of a term. It is a definition that is usually expected from request for definition. Such definition is usually stated as simply as possible in order to convey information to the widest audience. This form of definition also reports a meaning the definiendum already has. It does not give the definiendum a new meaning. In short, a lexical definition is descriptive, reporting actual usage of the term, within speaker's usage of the term rather than prescriptive, which would be to stick within a version regarded as correct, regardless of drift in accepted meaning. We need to state here that since lexical definitions report actual usage of terms, lexical definitions may be either true or false. Uduma, 2015. If the definition the definiens conforms to, that is, give true report, how a language community uses the definiendum, this definition will be true, but it will be false if the definiens does not conform to, that is, gives false report, the meaning a particular community attaches to the definiendum. For instance, the definition of garage as a building where cars are packed is true because it reports, conforms to, how the English-speaking people use it. But the definition of garage as a place of worship is false because it does not agree to its usage in the English language. You should note that while this kind of definitions may be false or true, it still does not have anything to do with the question of whether the definiendum names any real or existent thing. Therefore, the definitions of all words with long-established usage like unicorn, as animal like a white horse with a long straight horn growing on its head, is a lexical definition, and it is true because of the definiendum, unicorn, is meant by the way the definiens uses it. 3.3. Theoretical definition. This kind of definition has been described as a special brand of stipulative and precising definitions. It is distinguished from the two by the attempt of the two establish the use of this term within the context of a broader intellectual framework. This form of definition expresses the meaning of a word based on available theories in specific discipline. Theoretical definitions is directed at developing coherent theoretical account of the subject at hand. The definition does not attempt overcoming ambiguity or to achieve precision. Rather, it focuses on formulating a theory within which a fully correct definition of important terms could be stated. This form of definitions is found in disciplines that do formulate theory, and such theories requires precise definition, and results of such theories are always accepted as correct. Scientific discipline's a good example of this definition. In this kind of discipline, the definition of term is not likely to contradict another definition based on another theory, as we may have in other non-scientific disciplines like arts and social sciences. 3.4 Intentional and extensional definitions. You cannot attain clarity about meaning unless you succeed in distinguishing between intentional and extensional definitions. According to Copy, 1978, an intentional definition is the collection of properties shared by all and only those objects in a term's extension. For instance, the intentional definition of a term like zebra refers us to a certain four-footed animal that has white and black stripes throughout the body. This is the intentional definition of zebra, because zebra as a species falls under this characterization. So only zebras as a species have the distinctiveness and universality of the definition as it applies to them. In other words, the extension of a term consists of the set of things to which the term applies, while the intension of a term consists of the properties a thing must have to be included in the term's extension. And according to Salmon Wesley, since you can specify the meaning of a word through its extension or its intention, the distinction between extensional and intentional definitions becomes very necessary in language. 1984. There are two types of extensional definitions: nonverbal, or ostensive, and verbal. Ostensive definition occurs when you attempt to specify the meaning of a term by pointing to objects in its extension. For instance, if you want to teach someone the meaning of the word car, you simply need to point to a car and utter the word car. Keep in mind also that this definition does not go without some problems. For instance, there are cars with different shapes, sizes, and makes. In verbal definition, we rely on signification, that is, we use verbal definition to specify the meaning of a term. Here is an example of an enumerative verbal extensive definition. Philosopher means someone such as Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, Kant, or Hegel. Layman, 2000. Let us first state in clear terms that intentional definitions are applicable to things that have clearly defined set of properties. It can also be applied to sets that are too large to list an extensional definition. Thus, as opposite of extensional definition, the intentional definition of a term states the necessary and enough conditions for a thing being a member of a set. that is, the set of features which are shared by everything to which it applies. For example, an intentional definition of spinster is unmarried woman. Being an unmarried woman is an essential property of something referred to as a spinster. So we can say that it is a necessary condition, as one cannot be a spinster without being an unmarried woman. It also remains enough condition that any unmarried woman is a spinster. From our discussion of both intentional and extensional meanings, we can say that they are closely connected to each other, or that they are interrelated. Most times we sometimes feel that the intention of a concept or term determines its extension that we decide whenever we encounter any new furniture, whether it belongs among the chairs by seeing whether it has the relevant features. Thus, as the intension of a general term increases by specifying with greater details those features that a thing must have for it to apply, the term's extension tends to decrease since fewer items now qualify. 3.5. Denotative and connotative definition. These two kinds of definitions suggest the possibility of the definition of a general term, which can be done in two ways. A connotative definition tries to identify the intention of a term by providing a synonymous linguistic expression or an operational procedure for determining the applicability of the term. It should be noted that it may not always be easy to come up with an alternative word or phrase that has the same meaning or to specify a concrete test for applicability. But when this works, connotative definition provides an adequate means for securing the meaning of a term. 4.0. Conclusion. Philosophical definitions are useful in solving challenges. Unit 4, Definitions, Part 2, 1.0. Introduction. This study unit is the continuation of the preceding one. It introduces you to three major types of definitions. 2.0. Intended learning outcome. By the end of this unit, you will be able to solve daily challenges in communication using stipulative, recursive, persuasive, precising, genus, and difference definitions. 3.0. Main content. 3.1. Stipulative definition. As a writer or speaker, you are free either to introduce a new word into language or to give a word a new meaning. Once you do that, you are stipulating. A stipulative definition, therefore, is one that a term, whether new or existing, is given a new meaning for the purpose of argument or discussion in a given context. Uduma, 2015. A major feature of this definition is that it freely assigns meaning to a completely new term, creating a usage that had never been in existence. It specifies or stipulates the meaning of a word or phrase. The goal of this definition is to propose the adoption of shared use of a novel term that has no existing standard it can be compared with, and the definition stands correct, always except it turns out to be useless or inapt. For instance, it is on record that until the year 2000, the word double dodge had no generally accepted meaning. Double dodge means the anticipatory movements people commonly make when they nearly collide with some person, as when walking toward each other in a confined space, and are trying to avoid such collision. Layman, 2098. For instance, Rebecca and Eduardo nearly ran into each other in the hallway, but at the last moment they double dodged and then came to a full stop, whereupon Rebecca burst into laughter. Thus, even though the double dodge is stipulated here, we still understand the full meaning of the above expression. Always keep in mind that any stipulative definition is a recommendation or proposal to use a term in a certain manner, and the meaning or definition that may be given to a new or currently existing term may but not necessarily contradict the lexical definition of the term. That is why, as a recommendation or proposal, a stipulative definition is neither true nor false, accurate or inaccurate, correct or incorrect. This is responsible for the differences between this form of definition and lexical definition. A stipulative definition is a form of proposal or resolution to use the term to mean whatever it is used for. In those regard, a stipulative definition is directive and not informative. 3.2. Recursive definitions. This definition is sometimes referred to as inductive definition. It is a form of definition that defines a word in terms of itself, although in a useful way. Recursive definition consists of 3 steps. 1. At least one thing is stated to be a member of the set being defined. This is sometimes called a base set. 2. All things bearing a certain relation to other members of the set are also to count as members of the set. It is this step that makes the definition recursive. 3. All other things are excluded from the set. For example, a natural number can be defined as follows, after piano. 1. 0 is a natural number. 2. Each natural number has a distinct successor, such that the successor of a natural number is also a natural number, and no natural number is succeeded by 0. 3. Nothing else is a number. Here 0 will have exactly one successor, which for convenience we call 1. In turn, 1 will have exactly one successor, which we would call 2, and so on. You will notice that the second condition in the definition itself refers to natural numbers, and hence involves self-reference. Although this kind of definition involves a form of circularity, it is vicious, and definitions is quite successful. 3.2 Persuasive definition. Whenever a definition attempt to attach emotive meaning to the use of term, and thereby confuse the literal meaning of the term, such definition is said to be persuasive. In other words, a persuasive definition is one that has its term defined in such a way as to be an argument for a position. It is deceptive in that it has the surface of a dictionary definition. This is what makes persuasive definition to be different from lexical definition. Lexical definition aims to be neutral to all usages. Persuasive definitions are usually formulated to influence the attitude, excite, or stir the emotion of its hearers or readers. It is on this ground that a persuasive definition is always rejected, as it is often considering to be fallacious. This form of definitions is common in politics, sex, and religion. An example of this definition is found in Ambrose Bierce in the Devil's Dictionary, when he defines heathen as a benighted creature who has the folly to worship something that can see and feel. According to Uduma, a lexical definition of would be couched as one who does not believe in the Christian God, or one who does not follow an established religion. What Bierce was defining was an attempt to present as foolish those who believe in what cannot be seen or feel in other, that he might make a case for the heathens. 3.3. Precising definition. Precising definition is a form of definition that is used in contexts where the vagueness of a word, term, proposition is unacceptable. It is developed to take care of the ambiguity or vagueness that some other forms of definitions, particularly stipulative and lexical definitions, may give up on. This definition extends the lexical of a term for specific purpose by including additional criteria that narrow down the set of things meeting the definition. This sort of definition begins with the lexical definition of a term, but then propose to sharpen it by stipulating more narrow limits on its use. In this regard, precising definition combined two techniques to arrive at its form of definition. That is, the techniques of the lexical and stipulative definitions. This is done to reduce vagueness of a word or phrase. To this effect, persuasive definition is seen as a form of stipulative definition, which attempt to describe the true or commonly accepted meaning of a term, while stipulating an alter use, perhaps as an argument for some specific views. See C.L. Stevenson as quoted by Uduma, 2015. But then the lexical part must be correct, and the stipulative portion should appropriately reduce the vagueness. We need not to confuse the precising definitions combining the lexical and stipulative techniques for its use to mean that it is the same with the latter two. Precising definition differs from both lexical and stipulative definitions. One point of difference is that while stipulative definition freely assigns new meaning to a completely new or currently existing term, creating a usage that have never previously existed, that which is to be defined, definiendum. A precising definition is not a new term, but one whose usage is established, although vague. Precising definition does not in any way freely assign any meaning to its definiendum. They must remain true to established usage. However, precising definition must go beyond established usage if the vagueness of the definiendum is to be reduced. For example, a dictionary may define the term student as anyone attending an educational institution of any type or someone who studies something. However, a traveling agency or movie theater may propose a precising definition for the word student of Any person under the age of 18 enrolled in a local school for them to determine who is eligible to receive rebate or discounted tickets. 3.3. Definition by genus and difference. The method of definition by genus and difference is very important in language and logic. Indeed, it is known as one of the best ways to reduce ambiguity and vagueness. The definition by genus and difference also encompasses some other methods of definition such as stipulative, precising or real, theoretical, and lexical definitions. It is a kind of definition in which a word or concept that indicate a specific type of item is described first by a category, genus, then distinguished from other items in that category by differential. The differentiae of a species are the species properties that other members of the genus do not have. In short, the genus is the broad category, the species is a type within that category, and the differentiae are the distinguishing characteristics of the species. The words definiendum and definiens are two key words you must master before you can understand the method of definition by genus and difference. The definiendum stands for the word being defined, while the definiens is the word or words that do the defining. You also need some clarifications concerning proper subclass, genus, species, and difference. For a class X to be a proper subclass of another class Y, every member of class X must be a member of class Y. For example, the class of collies is a proper subclass of dogs. For the above explanation, it is clear that the species is simply a proper subclass of the genus dog. You should also note that the way these terms are used here is different from the use they are given in biology. In logic, the difference is the attribute that distinguishes the members of a given species from the members of other species in the same genus. Layman 2101. The process of constructing a definition by genus and difference is as follows. 1. Choose a term that is more general than the term to be defined and name its genus. 2. Find a word or phrase that identifies the attribute that distinguishes the species in question from other species in the same genus. In constructing this kind of definition, we begin by identifying a familiar broad category or kind, the genus, to which everything our term signifies, along with things of other sorts, belongs. Then we specify the distinctive features, the differentiae, that set them apart from all other things of this kind. For instance, if we are to define the phrase human being following the ancient Greek viewpoint, we shall say that human beings are members of a species. So we ask what the genus or general category of species is. We would say that the genus is animal. The genus then is animal and the species is human being. What is the differentia of the species, that is, the distinguished characteristics? That is, properties that human beings have that other animals do not have. From the ancient Greek view, it is rationality. The things that humans have that other animals do not have is rationality. So, rationality is the differentia of the human species, according to the ancient Greeks. Thus, Aristotle said man is the rational animal. By this he meant to be giving a definition of man or human being. The point we should note is that thus definition is used to categorize different plants, animals, and other things into biological categories. But then its use is not restricted to science. The idea behind this definition is the natural thing to do if we are to explain the meaning of a word to someone. According to Uduma O Uduma 2015, there are at least six criteria we need for this method of definition by genus and difference to be adequate. Criterion 1. Avoid circularity. A circular definition uses the term being as part of its own definition. It cannot provide any useful information. When this rule broken, the situation will be of two folds. It is either audience already understood the meaning of the term, or it cannot understand the explanation that includes that term, which eventually defeat the purpose of the explanation. For instance, if the term bachelor is defined as an unmarried man, or metaphysics is defined as systematic study of metaphysical issues, such definition offers no information. Criterion 2. Focus on essential features. A good definition must state enough essential characteristics so that through them the term tries to point out the features that are essential to the designation of things as members of the relevant group. In other words, a definition must not mention trivial characteristics. Criterion 3. Capture the correct extension. The definition must apply to the same thing as the term being defined. It must neither be too broad nor too narrow. For instance, when a bird is defined as warm-blooded animal, this definition is too broad as it has included all the other animals that are not birds. Or when it is defined as feathered, egg-laying animal. This is also too narrow as the male birds have been excluded. When it is defined as small flying animal, this is too broad and too narrow. It is too broad because it has included bat, which is not a bird, and too narrow because it has excluded ostriches. Criterion 4. Definitions should avoid figurative or obscure language. A definition is meant to explain the meaning of a term to someone who is not familiar with its proper application. Thus, language that does not help such a person learn how to apply the term should be avoided. Otherwise, the purpose of the definition is defeated. Criterion 5. Definition should be affirmative rather than negative. Definition is not expected to be negative where it can be positive. It is what a term is not, when of course what is meant to achieve is to make what the term is known to the audience. Criterion 6. Avoid definition by example. Since examples are by themselves not enough to define a term, it should be avoided. The only time this may not matter could be when the audience already have some larger or context of the term. 4.0. Conclusion. We have some other forms of definitions in this unit. However, it is important to note their limitations to definition in language. This is because English language contains finite number of words. Thus, any comprehensive list of definitions must either be circular or leave some terms undefined. Especially if every term of every definition must be defined, this process will have to continue ad infinitum. As a matter of fact, there are some terms that cannot be defined, for example, generalisma, unity, and so on. This is because we cannot assign any higher genus under which they may fall. However, to avoid this, some philosophers have argued for us to leave some terms undefined. For instance, Wittgenstein rejected the very idea that every explanation of the meaning of a term needed itself to be explained. To him, there is no need to support an explanation with another explanation. John Locke, on the other hand, simply conclude that we cannot define individuals. This is because names are learned by connecting an idea with sound, so that speaker and hearer have the same idea when the word is used. This to him is not possible when no one else is acquainted with the particular things that has fallen under our notice. All these positions point to the limitations that are inherent in definitions. Unit 5, Categorical Propositions Contents. 1.0, Introduction. This study unit introduces you to different types of categorical propositions. It will focus specifically on what logicians call categorical propositions such as universal affirmative and negative, particular affirmative and negative. As stated earlier, Module 2, Unit 2. In logic, proper statements and proposition are synonymous and therefore interchangeable. So to a logician, a proposition is that statement that can both be denied or asserted. These propositions are of 4 types and form two pairs, each pair having two propositions with it. The two pairs derive their names from the Latin words affirmo and nego, which stand for affirmative and negative respectively. Under affirmo, have universal affirmative and particular affirmative, while in negoe have universal negative and particular negative. In its standard form, a categorical proposition is as follows: quantity and subject class, quality, copula, predicate class. The quality, also understood as the number of members of the subject class, is usually indicated by quantifiers such as all and some, while the quality is the affirmation or negation of the verb copula is, which one is taken as a symbol not of identity but of inclusion. There is also a shorthand way of expressing the categorical positions individually. A is for universal affirmative, all S is PE, is for universal negative, no S is PI is for particular affirmative. Some S is PO is for particular negative, some S is not P1. This study unit on the types of propositions has been taken with little modification from N. Otakpor, A Preface to Logic, 2000. 2.0, Intended Learning Outcomes. By the end of this unit, you will be able to solve philosophical issues using categorical propositions. 3.0, Main Content. 3.1. The universal affirmative proposition, all S is P. The universal affirmative proposition contains two major, distinct characteristics. First, as a proposition, it always makes a universal statement, that is, a statement which embraces all the persons, objects, or concepts belonging to any particular class. Secondly, a universal affirmative proposition always makes positive statement, or affirms something about the universal class. For instance, a statement such as all humans beings falls under the category of a universal proposition. You can see that in the statement all human beings includes everyone, men, women, boys, and girls of all ages. It also includes all the races. In fact, the statement all human beings simply refers to all those who have human attribute. Besides, if you go on to say all human beings are mammals, then you will be making a universal affirmative proposition. You will be saying something positive or affirming something about all human beings, that is, that they are mammals. Your statement is categorical because you have not expressed any doubt about whether they are mammals. Otokpor, 2058. You should also keep in mind that the use of the adjective all to stress the universal character of this proposition is not always necessary. It is conventionally understood that some propositions without the adjective all can be universal. For instance, the statement, beings are mammals, clearly implies that all human beings are mammals. The adjective all is also called a quantifier. Here are some examples of universal affirmative prepositions. 1. Bride prices should be abolished. 2. Men should content themselves with one wife. 3. All politicians are liars. 4. All private schools are profit-making. 5. All educated Nigerian girls are proud. 6. All taxi drivers have clear vision. 7. All policemen take bribes. 8. All economists are stingy. 9. All these propositions are from Otokpor, 2000 p59. If you look carefully at the above propositions, you will discover that most universal propositions are not often true. They may be persuasive because they are widely believed. These examples also expose you to the danger of making broad assertions or claims. 3.2. The universal negative proposition, no S is P. The universal affirmative and universal negative propositions share the same characteristics. The only difference lies in the fact that one affirms while the other denies. That is, the universal affirmative proposition makes affirmative statements, while the universal negative makes negative statements. For example, if the universal affirmative proposition says, all human beings are mammals, the universal negative proposition will say, no human beings are mammals. However, they make an all-embracing and sweeping general statements which may sound plausible, but which may be false. Otokpor 2000. 64. Other examples are, bride prices should not be abolished. B. Men should not content themselves with one wife. As stated earlier, universal propositions mostly depend on public bias or prejudice either for or against something, persons, a class, or objects. For this reason, it is not often true. 3.3. The particular affirmative proposition, S is P. As already stated, we have two pairs of categorical propositions, affirmative and negative. Under the pair of affirmative, we have the universal affirmative and the particular affirmative proposition. The difference between the two lies in the fact that the particular affirmative proposition makes a statement about some but not all of the members of any class of objects or persons. For instance, if you make a statement such as, some students are lazy, you are simply making a particular affirmative preposition. You are making a positive statement about some members of the class of students. That is, that some students are lazy, not that all students are lazy. 3.4. The particular negative proposition, some S is not P. It is the opposite of a particular affirmative proposition. Although it belongs to the pair of negative affirmative proposition, it still remains different from the universal negative. The particular negative proposition denies something about some members of a class. For instance, if you say that some taxi drivers are not drunk, you are making a particular negative proposition. You are simply denying the attribute of being drunk to some, but not all taxi drivers. 4.0. Conclusion. This study unit dealt with the different types of propositions. It dealt specifically with what logicians call categorical propositions. 5.0 Summary. To get the best of this unit, you may need to replay it again. Also drop a comment on the comment section stating the important lesson learnt. Discussion forum. A. Match the definition on the left to the letter of the item on the right that best characterizes it. 1. Tall man means male human over 6 feet in height. A. Enumerative definition. 2. Tome means large book. B. Definition of subclass. 3. A sound argument is one that see lexical definition. 4. Has only true premises. D. Stipulative definition. 5. Is valid, that is, its conclusion cannot e. Precising definition be false while its premises are true. 6. Humans means rational. F. Theoretical definition. B. Identify one defect in each of the following definitions using the 6 criteria for definition by genus and difference. 1. Penguin means bird that can't fly, but not an ostrich, cassowary, or emu. 2. An octagon is a figure shaped like a stop sign. 3. A triangle is a closed plane figure having 3 sides of equal length. 4. An ellipse is a cross between a circle and a rectangle. 5. Homosexual means a man who is erotically attracted exclusively, or at least primarily, to other men. 6. A wealthy person is one who has as much money as Bill Gates or Aliko Dangote. 7. Evil is defined as the darkness that lies within the human soul. 8. Blue means having a bluish color. 9. Time is the great container into which we pour our lives. 10. Oligarchy means a form of government in which the ruling power belongs to a few persons. 11. Post your answers on the comment section.